Welcome to all panelists and attendees for our first chicken panel, perhaps first of many. We've got a great wealth of knowledge here today to talk about raising chickens in northeastern Minnesota. And I'll kind of run through a few things. By the way, first off, my name is Stefan Meyer. I work with the Finland food chain, and this is brought to you by the work of the Finland food chain here in good old Finland, Minnesota. That's a lot of Finlands. So we're going to have the panelists kind of run through and really quickly introduce themselves. We're going to really do our best to keep this to an hour. I have a feeling this group of people could talk chickens for several hours, and I'm sure many of you could probably listen for several hours. So let's go ahead and get started, and I'm just going to kind of go across my screen in whatever order I see you all. So why don't we start with Celeste up at my top left, and go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Celeste. I live right outside of Finland, probably about 3 miles out on one. I have a flock of egg layers, and I do natural chicken keeping. They're free range. They do whatever they want. I rarely feed them in the summertime, and they come back to roost at night and give me lots of eggs.
Excellent. Okay, we're moving over to Corey and Trevor.
Yeah, so I'm Corey. I've been raising chickens for about 7 years. I'm living in Finland, Minnesota on a 100-year-old homestead, and both Pam and I raise chickens together. So when she gets, she'll probably tell them why.
Okay, I'm Trevor. I live in the Clover Valley area near Two Harbors. We've been raising chickens on our farm for about 5 years now. We raise Icelandic landrace birds, and so they're pretty strong free rangers. We can talk more about that later. But we also have red bourbon turkeys, and we have goats here as well.
And next we'll go with Pam.
Hi, I'm Pam. I live in Finland, Minnesota. I've been raising chickens for about 7 years now. We currently have a flock of around 30 adults and 60 youngins that we're raising. We've also got some ducks, some guineas, some turkeys and pigs, and a whole farm. Whole kit and caboodle.
Okay, next we'll hit Honor.
Hi, I'm Honor. I live in Finland. I've been doing chicken things for about 15 years. I started doing helping a friend with chickens and ended up with the chickens myself, and it's like a virus. Anyway, I started out doing it in Isabella, where it's a bit colder than Finland, but it's still just, it's challenging, as you all know, to raise chickens in colder climates. So at this point, I have the descendants of those original chickens I got from my friend with many other things mixed in. And so we call them Isabella specials, but they've kind of evolved over time, and they're related to Corey and Pam's chickens and maybe some of the other folks' chickens as well.
Okay, next up we'll have Karen.
Karen Hamilton, live up in Murphy City, if anybody knows where that is. Raised chickens off and on for about 8 years. We did meat birds a couple times. Right now I have what I lovingly refer to as the rainbow flock. I've gotten chickens from Honor. I've gotten chickens from our friend Jessie in Silver Bay. Yeah, I love my girls, and I'm here probably to learn as much as I can share.
Okay, Cindy, you're next.
Hi, I'm Cindy Hale in Clover Valley, and we don't raise chickens anymore. We're officially in the chicken PTSD category, but we did raise meat birds, laying hens, turkeys, and ducks for about 7 years, a maximum of about 500 birds a year. We did on-farm processing. I spent a lot of time with the MISA and the MDA working out the details of what is and isn't allowed. So there's a lot more clarity now in terms of all of that than there was. So that's kind of my expertise area.
And Laurie, go ahead and just kind of introduce yourself, maybe where you're currently at, and a little bit about you and your relationship with chickens.
All right, I'm Laurie Kallinen, and I live just outside of Silver Bay. Got this notion to have a little backyard flock of, maybe 3 or 4 birds about 8 years ago. And right now I think I have 25, and I love my girls. They are my pets, my entertainment, my doorway to my neighbors. I'm the crazy chicken lady. I have become the crazy chicken lady.
Excellent. Well, there are worse names to have in this world. So again, just thank you to all the panelists. So the panelists had previously met and kind of produced a list of about 10 to 12 different topics or categories that they thought would be really useful. We recognize that we may not get to all of those in this first session. So they kind of chose 4 to generally talk about. And so what they thought they'd talk about is just the basics, what you need to get started, feed, like different types, setting things up so you can leave for a period of time. Vacation is always good. And weather, hot, cold, winter, summer. And some of the other ones that they had thrown out there would be like egg storage, natural brooding versus incubating, different types of breeds, breeding your own birds, free range versus safe place, and dealing with predators. And again, those are kind of the additional topics that we may not have time to get to everything today, but we also want to hear your questions and kind of be guided by your questions. So, okay, panelists, how would you like to get started? So maybe, what did you all have to get you started when you first got into it?
I can talk, because Honor sort of started that story of how, you know, you help someone with chickens and then you get chickens and it's kind of like a virus, and that's how we got chickens from Honor. We moved back up to the homestead and Honor was like, well, you probably do need chickens, don't you? Like, yeah, we probably do. And ever since then we've been raising chickens. So I really am, I like to say that you need to make some sort of infrastructure before you get the animals. Have somewhere to put them in, have a shelter for them and some sort of a yard, because doing that, like, oh, I have these chickens, now I need to put them somewhere. It's very difficult to do and sometimes doesn't work out well. So that's my main key piece of advice.
Okay, when I first started with the concept of keeping chickens, I actually read about it, and I subscribed to Backyard Poultry magazine and went to the library, got every book I could, and boiled it all down into what can I do, and made my plan before I got my birds. I think that's a key thing, is decide on your setup beforehand. And we can get into the specifics of a small coop or a chicken tractor or a great big coop or things down the road. But I think the key is to decide what you want your birds for personal use or for sale or for meat. And then what are their care needs, to set a structure that will supply the care needs for the birds year round.
And keeping in mind that what they need year round is different depending on the breed that you have. So for example, with, I don't, for people who want to do just a small backyard flock in a small area, I actually don't recommend that they get the breed that we have, the Icelandic landrace. They go crazy if they're not out. And so learning birds that you want to get and making your decision based on what your ultimate goal with chickens is super important.
Yeah, I actually started with like commercial meat bird kind of breeds, just because it was like, well, if this doesn't work out, I can just kill them and eat them. and they are, you know, I mean, if you raise them yourself in your backyard, they don't do the crazy things that they do in like factory farms where they get super duper top heavy and fall over. They're not really bred, those breeds are not really made to live for very long because they are just meant to like grow up to a certain week-old, you know, threshold, and then they're often just butchered. But they will, you know, we did, I can't remember what they were called. I want to say like black stars, or I'm really kind of bad on the commercial breeds of chicken, but we kept them over a winter, some of them anyway, and then had some other, I think like Brahmas or something like that were really good at sitting on eggs and being maternal. And so we did actually like hatch some of our own birds that next year, and then kill the commercial meat bird varieties that we had, because they were getting kind of like their legs were, you could tell they didn't like to walk anymore. So like it matters what breed you're dealing with, because but you can
after raising a whole bunch of different breeds, meat birds, layers, dual purpose birds, unless you are really growing for meat, just stay away from those birds. You can get meat out of dual purpose animals that forage better, that are much hardier. So unless your primary objective is producing big breasted meat birds, just don't get those. Start with something else. And I echo what Laurie and everybody else has said. Really be clear about what your objective is, you know, especially as you start. If you want to do everything, you're going to make yourself crazy, and you're going to spend way too much money, and you're going to really ruin the experience for yourself. So start with a few birds, maybe, you know, get some eggs, and, you know, learn how to cook a stew hen, and then you can expand from that point, but don't try to do it all at one time.
Maybe that's a good time to jump in with one of the questions we'd had from the registration process was, what breeds then are best for this region? Are there certain breeds that are hardier that can handle our winters that you've discovered, or perhaps some that you've discovered do not raise that one up here? Celeste raised her finger there.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. I researched before I got any, and I started out with Cochins, Wyandottes, and Barred Rocks. And I've noticed that the Cochins, and I've had chickens for almost 7 years now, and I still have 2 of the original Wyandottes. The Barred Rocks tend to get frostbite real easy on their feet, but the rest of my birds, they're really hardy, but they do get the frostbite on their feet and lose toes. That's what I've noticed.
That brings up another point about choosing breeds. I always select a breed specifically that has small combs and small wattles. That's for those who are brand new to chicken, you know, the bright red comb on the top and the wattle under the chin, because they are less likely to get frostbite. I don't heat my coop in the winter, and so I specifically choose small combed and small wattled birds for that very reason.
Yeah, I would echo that. I would echo also what Celeste said, that I want to say one of the original breeds that was mixed into our variety of chicken that I have at my in my life now was Wyandottes. That they were pretty hardy and kind of annoying, but they lasted a long time, which was helpful. I do remember a particular Wyandotte that would sit outside my bedroom window and make a lot of noise. But they were persistent and you know, hardy enough to make it. And then also that I specifically breed my chickens, I select for small combs or hardly any comb at all, any small wattles. And even like I have a lot of Americana in my flock, and I think it's cute how they have those little beards, but I've definitely had chickens that get frostbite because of that. Like it's a thing that lots of headgear builds up the frost.
We've been selectively breeding our Icelandic flock for a while to bring out rose combs. Those seem like they handle the frost a lot better. With the straight comb, so the one that everybody thinks of as a comb on a chicken that sticks up, the tips freeze off pretty easily. We don't heat our coop either. It's insulated, not heated. But rose combs, we've not had frostbite issues on hens or roosters. And we've got a couple of roosters with some pretty big rose combs, and we haven't had any frost issues with that. So, but this is, I guess, our third year now trying to selectively breed for that trait. And so far we're having good luck with that.
For the person that wants to get into just having a few backyard hens for eggs for themselves, wants something to easily take care of, and a bird that tends to be easily handled, I definitely recommend the Buff Orpingtons, any of the Orpington breeds. Americanas aren't bad. They aren't quite as quick to let you pick them up as the Buff Orpingtons. Barred Rocks are also really good. And Black Australorps are the 4 that I started with, because they, amongst other things, were also quicker to let you pick them up and quicker to be comfortable being handled. Some breeds, you aren't going to catch them without a net. So if that's something you want, is to be able to handle your birds, that's something to keep in the mix.
I'll echo. So you probably saw me laugh when you said Buff Orpingtons. So yes, they lay well and they're very broody. But at least when we raised them, they were like the snotty blonde on the playground. They were noisy and obnoxious, and so we hated them for that reason. But the Black Australorps we loved, and my favorite by far was the silver-laced Wyandottes. There's lots of different Wyandottes, but I really like the silver-laced Wyandottes. And if you want a flock that is handleable, the thing you do is you start handling them from the time they're little chicks. You don't wait till they're bigger. So yeah.
I'm going to weigh in on that too. The temperament I found in the hens, my kids are able to handle them. I got a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, and they can go out there and be around the chickens. And for a long time, my daughter was very afraid of them, but it's helped that having the friendlier breeds, that she's not intimidated and can be out there, because collecting eggs is like their favorite thing to do. They do it twice a day. They love it. And with nice hens, it makes it easy for them.
As long as we're in the behavior category of chickens, let's have a quick talk about roosters. Unless you're breeding and incubating your own eggs, you do not need a rooster. Okay? So they're loud, they're obnoxious, and if anybody's going to get aggressive, it's going to be the roosters. We had a strict 3 strikes and you're out rule on roosters at our place. And yeah, so you don't need a rooster unless you're trying to create fertile eggs that you're going to incubate.
Good to note, roosters taste really good.
Maybe a quick question on that note. If you get a bunch of chickens, is there a quick way to know if you've ended up with a rooster, or do you have to wait and like how, like if the new timer comes on, how would they tell if they ended up with a rooster in their batch?
It depends on what age they are. It's a practice eye thing. Like I'm trying to teach my daughter that right now, because we have chicks that are growing up, and I can tell some of them anyway. And part of what I do also is I want the earliest maturing roosters are the ones that I'm going to keep to breed with. And so if I can tell it's a rooster, that I'm like, you are the one. And then after that, I have to pay attention and tell which ones are the roosters, and they are the ones that are going in the freezer for the winter. So, but yeah, it's really difficult when they're really little. I know there are people who know how to do it, but I feel like I'm better at it than some just as they get older. But I mean, there's people that know how to sex chickens when they're just hatched, and that's amazing to me. I do not know how to do that.
It is really difficult when they're that young, because you have to be like, when they're just a day old, it's about turning them over and like checking their vent and looking for their reproductive organs. But it's very, very difficult, because as they are so little, they're incredibly fragile, and you could like permanently damage, or you know, inadvertently kill them if you do it incorrectly. Other ways that I've seen of sexing them are when they're more than a few days old, but not a few weeks old. It's about splaying out the wings and checking for a certain bifurcation of them. So males kind of are a little more into 2 and females are more into, I don't know. That's another way. And then you can also look for forming combs. The ones that form their combs a lot earlier are more likely to be male, to be roosters. That's not as it's not as good of a technique because a lot of our hens do have larger combs and they have shown up earlier. And then you know, if you're really unsure about it, you could wait for the crow, see if it crows or not. Oh, you can also look for feathers. Rooster feathers tend to be a lot more thin and longer, especially around the neck. And then at the, they're called the saddle feathers. They're on the back that lay down right over the tail feathers. Those get to be really skinny and really long, but you don't get those and probably until well after they're crowing.
Yeah.
There's also
The earliest I've ever had a rooster crow was 4 weeks old, and I was like, what on earth?
wow.
But that is really rare.
There are also some breeds of chickens that when the chicks are hatched, the chicks are different colors between male and female.
Yes.
You know, that's called a sex-linked trait. And the coloration of the chick is actually different from a male to a female.
Yeah, that's the easy way. That's
And
like
I've learned
Those are hybrids, right? You can buy them sex linked, but it's hard to breed the sex linked. Is that correct?
I don't know.
I mean, you can do it. I've done that inadvertently. It is from my understanding, and I'm not, you know, an expert on genetics here, but this is just what my experience was. I believe I had a black rooster, and I had a whole bunch of barred rock hens that someone had given me. And the offspring of the barred rock hens, the barred rock colored, you know, the, what do you call it, the stripy ones were all male, and so it switched. You know, it was like the original was the barred females and the black male, and then in their offspring it switched, and it was the stripy males and the black females. And that it only lasts that one generation, I believe. It may last longer, but that was the most definitive. It was very obvious. It was like, oh, okay. So I think you're right, Cindy. It's a hybrid thing that is predictable for one generation, and then it becomes less predictable as you go on, kind of like with plants. But again, I don't know enough about that.
And I learned with the coachins that I have, I can usually tell within a couple days when they start to feather out on their feet. The roosters will get a much heavier feathering on their feet, and they have thicker legs, and the hens will have black, skinnier legs. So that's how I can tell the difference when they're that little. So the coachins are kind of cool it's easy to tell the difference.
With the Icelandics that we have, the leg thickness thing is something that we look at too. It's about as reliable as the size of the comb that starts to develop, we've found. So the hens tend to have thinner legs.
Spurs too. Checking for the spur buds. The male roosters have these extra, very sharp, almost like thorns. They're very somewhat thick, and then they start out as small buds on the bottoms of their feet. Sorry, not on the bottom, but I don't know how to explain it, but that's the best I can do. So they get spurs, and they do have to grow. They have to form as a little bud, and you can check for those.
Spurs on roosters are similar to a dew claw on a dog or a cat.
Again, with the Icelandics, we have our older hens all have spurs too. They have some kind of big crazy spurs that you don't expect to see on hens in most breeds. But
Yeah, it looks like we have a few other questions here, and I also wanted to maybe look at some of
Can I just, one more thing about the sexing chickens? I don't think that anybody has figured out a safe Google search for those terms. Need I say anymore? So if anybody does have a link that they know of that they would want to share with others, yeah, Googling those terms together will only take you to dark places.
don't search for that at work.
Okay, so maybe to finish up breed talks, we had one question that came through. Was wondering if someone is a urban farmer or even a homesteader, you know, and they're a beginner. We kind of talked about the breeds, but they wanted to know like what breed and how many to just take care of their family's needs. So maybe if everyone wanted to do a little quick popcorn reply on that one, and then we'll kind of move into talking about feed, the different types of feed that you all use with your chickens.
Well, I have, as I said, the Barred Rocks and the Cochins. They're both really good egg layers. The Barred Rocks especially. My Cochins are mostly broody. I get like 10 broodies every season. But Barred Rocks, I think, and for just a small family, I think maybe even 2 to 4 hens, depending on the size of your family, because they will, in the beginning, they'll lay every day. And as they get older, then it just slows down to like every other day. I mean, I still have 2 of my original Barred Rocks, and they lay probably every 3 or 4 days. And they're like 6 years old.
So I would say that it really depends on, it depends on your family. It depends on what you're expecting to do with all of the eggs. It does also depend on the time of year, because chickens won't lay continually throughout the year. There are several times when they're not going to lay as much. So in the fall, right when the light starts going down and starts getting really, really short days, they're not going to lay as much. So you can't expect to get, if you have 12 hens, you can't expect to get 12 eggs every single day. It's going to be, you know, especially during the season, during different seasons.
We've done supplemental light once in the winter to kind of fake the day length and keep getting eggs through the winter. And we got eggs through the winter, but then we had a crazy molt where everybody molted at once in the middle of January. And we will never do that again because, I mean, you know, we had a big enough flock and the coop is insulated well enough that we didn't lose anybody because of it. But you feel bad for them when you go out there in January and they're all half naked on the perches. So.
Yeah, and you know, again, if it's backyard, you're just doing for your own production. If you do, because to feed a hen all winter long and not get any eggs out of it is expensive, right? So one thing we did laying hens over the winter for 4 or 5 years, and we always use supplemental light because we were trying to make money on selling the eggs. So the time length, the whatever, it's 14 hours. They need at least 14 hours a day, and they respond to the increasing light more so than the actual hours. So one trick you can do is let day length go, natural day length go down below 14 hours, and then start adding a couple minutes every few days until you get back up to 14 hours, and they respond to that increasing light, and then they'll stay laying once you get to that 14 hours a day.
So one challenge I've had in that is getting a reliable timer that doesn't mess up in the middle of that, and then you're really screwed up. So I don't know if anyone's had good success or any thoughts on how to have a timer that's reliable.
I have a timer on mine all winter. The light comes on at 4 in the morning and goes off at noon. I don't know if this is true, but I have read that the morning hours of light are more important. And I just have my light plugged right into this timer, and so it comes on. I turn it on when it starts getting dark by 6 o'clock at night. I plug the light in and start adding light at that point, and do so through the whole winter.
Cindy, did you have any problems with molting because of that, as you described it there?
No, we didn't, but we didn't have Icelandics. We had black Australorps, Wyandottes, our Americanas. We had more of an issue with mites in the winter.
Yes.
I was gonna say I've done winters with supplemental light and winters without. So, and I have a timer that I've had for years that has it's really basic. It's not digital. I think that's the key thing. It's had chickens poop on it and it still works. But yeah, having a good timer is key. And I guess what I do is, like, I would echo what Cindy said, is I let them, they often kind of in the heat of summer sort of scale back. They don't produce as many eggs, and then often they maybe have a little resurgence in the fall when things start to get cool, but then often mine will molt in the fall. And I don't usually start the supplemental light until after that's over with, because then they've already done it. And then when I start with the increasing light, like Cindy was saying, they seem to really respond to that.
Okay. Why don't we, one of the other topics you had all identified was talking about the different types of feed. And we do have one question hanging out there that I think would be awesome to get to. It is certainly a little, it might be a little bit more involved. It's regarding, techniques about natural hatching and brooding, which could be probably a whole nother topic. But let's talk feed first, and then if we can get to that question, let's get some opinions on it. We're at about 2:35 right now, so we have another 25 minutes. So whoever wants to jump in.
Okay, I can go first. My husband Corey and I, we do a fermented style feed. So we have a local producer called Wittes. I forget what area they're out of, but they are pretty close to us in Minnesota. We order some of their non-GMO layer, and we take several scoops of that, and we actually put it into water, just enough water to cover it, and let it ferment. Just let it sit for 3 days. And in that process, that opens up a lot of more nutrients that would not have otherwise been available. So if we think about how yogurt, it has all of this beneficial bacteria, it has a type of culture in it that our guts respond to really well. The fermentation process that we do, it's not milk based, but instead is wild yeast based. So whatever comes out of the air. That opens up a lot more nutrition and supplemental value for the chicken's guts. And bonus, we're also able to feed them less each day because they don't need as much.
And one of the reasons we started doing that, and it's not as important now because of the feed mix we have, but we were using peas as our protein base in our feed mix. And chickens, I really don't suggest you doing a pea-based chicken feed unless you're doing this ferment, because of the high levels of phytic acid, and they're not going to be able to digest most of that, but fermentation process neutralizes that acid. So that's something to consider. It does make the nutrients in your food way more bioavailable, so they get more out of each amount of food. And if you've ever looked into buying supplemental probiotics for your flock, you'll notice that it's very expensive. This is free, and it's actually a better set of probiotics.
Not only that, but we were struggling with getting feed, and we were buying whole grain and mixing it, and it wasn't ground, and so soaking it so that it was more digestible for the chickens just in general was also. And then also in the wintertime, freezing water is always a thing. So when we I also ferment feed, and Corey, Corey and Pam and I have been back and forth about technique on that for quite a long time, and kind of sharing how we do it, and we're involved in going in on feed together and things like that to try to work that out, because we were trying to get as organic as possible, but it was really hard to source that. It also just like, yeah, your waters, I don't have a great way to have a heated waterer in my coop over the winter, and so the fermented feed, I just like put it out in the morning and they eat it, and it has a lot of liquid in it, and so then they don't need as much water that's going to be there freezing. Like sometimes I do in the afternoon go out and put more water out, but again, you know, when it's 20 below, that's going to freeze almost like right away. So
yeah, and going back to one of the things that Corey said is that when we were using whole grain, we had to use the fermentation process to soften it up. So for brand new chicken people, chickens cannot chew. So what they need is grit as well. So that's one of the things that we also provide for them. And grit it's just like gravel kind of a stuff. And it helps, what do? They eat that, and then it all comes together in the gizzard and it kind of mashes around, and that's how they're able to digest it.
Well, I applaud the fermentation process and think that's wonderful, but not everybody is into that, at least in the start. And I've looked at it, and I may go to fermentation in the future, but at this time I'm using pellets, and I have a hopper in my coop that I fill an entire bag of layer pellets into the hopper at a time. And so I'm only filling that hopper in the summertime, maybe every other week, because my birds are out free ranging and getting at least 50% of their nutrients from just the bugs and the grasses and whatever they're finding outside, with the side benefit that I don't have near the bugs in my backyard. But in the winter, I do cook a grain mash for them. You know, it's just a warmed grain mash that gives them something warm to eat first thing in the morning. They still have their pellet feed around the clock to eat as they want, but this gives them something warm in the winter.
Regarding the water issue, we don't have a heated coop, like I mentioned earlier, but we've had really good luck with using 5-gallon bucket for water with the side mount nipples on the bottom, and then just a bucket heater inside of it. We do have electricity run to our coop because it's up against our garage, so that enables that. But we've had good luck with water that way.
And I've used those heated dog bowls. That's what I use for heating water, and it works up until about when it starts getting to like 25 or 26 below. That's when I have to go out and usually fill it twice a day, because it will start to freeze.
That's a good point too, since we're talking about cold temps and stuff. One of the things that we've adopted is those rubber sort of like horse feeders, I think is what they're called. And that's really important because it's gonna freeze. You're gonna get something solid frozen in your feeder no matter what it is, and you're gonna need to be able to kick it out somehow or go buy a new one because it's not useful, and almost everything will shatter except for these rubber containers work really, really well. And I did want to mention too, if any of you are in the Finland area and you're wanting to be one of the local producers and you have interest in trying to get to the point of raising feed to be a local producer that provides chicken and eggs to local people, the co-op has a local producer policy. You can go in and talk to Carl, the manager at the co-op, about it, but it does give you some access to a little bit more affordable feed through WITIS, like Pam was talking about. So just something to keep in mind.
I was going to weigh in on feed and electricity in the coop and the conveniences of that. My husband spoils me and ran electric out to my coop for me. So I've done the heated dog dish for fermented foods in the wintertime, which was really nice, and it kept it from freezing. I also have one of those heated pans that you set a metal waterer on. I've had great success with that. I don't heat the coop. I do have lights out there. I've always been afraid of fires. I think it comes from my larger livestock experience with barn fires and my fear of losing my animals because of something going wrong. But I do like the heated dog dish for the fermented feed, and then to keep my water unfrozen or, you know, thawed all winter. And I have found, though, I get very deep bedding out there in the wintertime too. And I actually turn over a used horse mineral bucket that the horses have used. I flip that bucket over and it's a flat surface and it's the perfect size to set that heater on and then the water on, and seems to work for us really well. I don't have some of the struggles that some of you have. You're more dedicated than I am. I want my electricity.
It's probably a good thing to note, though, that fire danger, and to be really careful with heat lamps or other heating elements, because people burn their houses down all the time, keeping chickens in ways that aren't safe. So be careful.
This goes back to choosing the right kind of breeds for our area too, because if you choose the right kind of breeds for our area, they don't require the heat. They can deal with, I don't heat my coop. I enclose the run in plastic, but other than that, I don't heat the coop. The door to the run is open around the clock year round, and 20 below, they're in there and they are just fine. You'll actually go into the coop and it's warmer in the coop just from their own heat.
And that's really where deep bedding can play a really great role. It's like you're just going to keep laying down new hay, straw, sawdust, whatever bedding you're using, and you're just going to keep laying that down. It's going to be composting, and it's creating a lot of heat. And it also creates something that the chickens can like scratch into and nuzzle into on a really cold night. So definitely having a coop, even though it's not heated, sounds like none of us heat our coops, ever have. So there you have it. You don't have to heat it, but you do want an enclosed area where they can get away from the wind and the snow, and then you do deep bedding and keep them, as long as they have food and water, they'll do fine.
And one of the big advantages, I mean, you think of having chickens, what do you get? You get meat, you get eggs, but you have to also consider manure. Manure is one of the huge benefits you get from chickens. And doing that deep bedding is one of the better ways to get a better end result, because your chicken manure is really, really high in nitrogen. And the idea is to capture that nitrogen, but it'll run off right up down into the ground if it's not matched with the right amount of carbon. So you're adding that bedding, the straw, the wood chips, whatever it is, to match your nitrogen so that you hold on to that more, so you actually get more benefit in your garden when you add it there.
Right. One thing on the bedding type too that we've had really good luck with, we used straw for a while, we used sawdust for a while, but we're using wood pellets, like you would use for horses. We actually get it as bags for wood burning stoves though. There's nothing added to it, it's just compressed wood. It's cheaper when you buy it as the fuel pellets than if you buy it as substrate for a barn stall. But it works really well with a deep bedding method.
I got to say something about those wood pellets, because again, my experience with larger livestock, they are my absolute favorite bedding for horses and cattle in a barn. And my number one reason is the smell. You do not stink up a barn with those wood pellets. They are amazing.
Yeah, my chicken coop smells like a sauna, sort of.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah, it looks like we have a number of questions, but you've actually kind of really been answering them without me even throwing them out to you. So yeah, Barbara Crow had thrown this question out both before and during, and she's really interested in hearing about some techniques for natural hatching and brooding, and we're down to about 10 minutes. And that's one of the only questions kind of hanging out there yet that we haven't addressed, so maybe we can have a quick little conversation about that.
I mean, it helps if you have to have chickens that want to sit on eggs. Some breeds just don't want to do that, and some breeds really, like Celeste was saying that she has like 10 that want to do that at any given time. I have chickens that, it's like, I don't know, I guess like I had 40 chickens this last winter, and probably 10 of them have off and on wanted to sit on eggs this spring and summer. And I do my best to accommodate that. Although I have a rather large incubator, and I incubate eggs in my incubator. But then what I do is I actually, I set up a broody hen to sit on eggs, and then I set up the timing to to hatch the eggs in the incubator at the same time. And then when that happens, often when her eggs have hatched, I put more chicks under her.
Mm-hmm.
So I have mamas that are raising sometimes like 20 chicks, because they do better with an actual mom. I mean, you can buy chickens through the mail, you can incubate chicks in an incubator, and they will do fine. They are very like monkey see, monkey do as they're growing up, and they will learn to scratch, and they will learn to eat, and they will do pretty well, like just instinctively. But with the mom, she teaches them like the best places to find food, and she teaches them how to hide from danger and all that kind of stuff. So it's really kind of cool to do that. And I suspect, I'm not totally sure about this, that chicks that are raised by a hen are more likely to go broody and want to raise their own babies as well. And so if you start doing that, it's going to keep that train going, is what I think. But yeah, you have to have a hen that wants to do that in the first place, and they go broody, they sit in their little box, and it helps if you don't collect all your eggs right away. Each day they go broody because they see a pile of eggs. Sometimes you can trick them, you can use golf balls or beach rocks. I've actually found like round white rocks down by Lake Superior, and those are like my fake eggs. And so you can get them to go broody on something like that, and then I actually move them because I don't have a good space in my chicken coop to allow them to do that in there. Some people do. You can set it up where I've seen amazing chicken coops where people have a setup where they can there's a broody hen, let's block that off and like open this other thing up, and she's got her own space. Cool. It's my dream someday. But I don't have that, so I have dog crates in a different location, and I have to set her up a new nest and bring her in there and set her in there. And sometimes they take to the new nest and sometimes they don't, just depending on what's going on. And if they take to the new nest, then like I said, I kind of have my like whole thing where I do the timing with the incubator and then give them more babies or whatever. But that's how I do it, I guess.
Our Icelandics are really good at raising chicks. They raise them all. We've had at any given, or probably the biggest number we've had at one time on eggs is probably 8 to 10 at a time. But as it happens, they also raise turkey chicks really well. We have an Icelandic hen right now that's raising 20 red bourbon chicks on the second half of our coop, because the turkeys are just not good at it. When the chicks are little, like turkeys are really sweet, but they're really dumb, like really dumb. And the turkey hens just can't be trusted with the chicks when they're little, not until they're big enough that they won't go through the fence down in the turkey pasture. So yeah, we have an Icelandic hen raising 20 red bourbon chicks right now.
I've raised chicks a number of different ways. My first chicks that I got, of course, I incubated indoors under a heat lamp. The bonus to doing that is you're handling those chicks all the time. They become very friendly and stay that way as they become adults. I've also had a time when I wanted to raise some broody hen or raise some chicks. And since I didn't have a rooster, I borrowed a broody hen and some fresh eggs from a friend who has fertile eggs and brooded them that way, and then the mama raised them. I have also had a hen that wouldn't consistently stay on the same pile of eggs. She kept switching nest boxes and whatnot, very aggravating. She would get a clutch of eggs halfway through brooding and then go sit somewhere else and just be tired of it. But she wouldn't quit being broody. So I've actually ordered live chicks. I've done this 3 or 4 times now, and put the live chicks under that broody hen. And all of a sudden she's like, oh, my chicks have hatched, and takes them from there. And it's worked wonders. So there's lots of different ways you can go about doing that.
I'm a big proponent of tricking hens like that.
And those who have, you know, had their self-fertile eggs, so you do need to have a ratio. Is it like 1 rooster per 15 birds, something like that? What's
Like
the ratio?
10 or 15 is ideal. Yeah.
Yeah, so you don't need a lot of roosters to service a fair number of hens. And then the other piece is if the hen is laying 1 egg a day, then if you're going to get, so you kind of got to play this numbers game, because once a hen goes broody, she's not eating and drinking. She's just incubating, and she can starve herself to death. So if you if you have a bird that's really broody and you're confident or reasonably confident that your other eggs that are being produced by less broody hens are fertile, then stuff that nest and get that bird incubating a bunch of eggs quickly. And then what I did, because we had chickens like pushing each other out of their nest boxes, and so keeping track of the eggs became a nightmare. So we just every day we would put a little X on the egg that was produced that day, and so we could keep track of when there was a new egg, and blah blah blah, whether they were turning the eggs or not. So there's lots of that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah, mine hens would always climb in multiple hens in one nest box. They'll lay eggs right on top of the other hen. So when I had eggs under a broody hen, I marked each egg with a permanent marker so that I could tell what was newly laid eggs compared to which ones she was actually brooding, and just take out the new ones.
Yeah, so really quick to go through some numbers about natural hatching. Incubation period for chicken eggs is 1 day from laying to hatching conceivably. There, as with humans, there's a little bit of variation on due dates. But then the 3 major things for hatching eggs is the heat, the humidity, and air circulation. So if you ever want to get an incubator, make sure that it has a fan in with it. It's got a turner that's going to keep the eggs moving just as the mother would. And then it's also got a temperature gauge. A digital temperature gauge is what I prefer. And then also has a place to put water in as well that can be evaporated up so that you can control the humidity as well.
Just going to say that with mine, I do, as Anna was saying, where you would have something to like close it off. I'm in the process of trying to do that because I have an issue with, because I have about 25 hens out there, and as many as 10 go broody at a time. I don't have that many nesting boxes. So I'm going to have to somehow figure out some way to take part of my stall barn, because my coop is attached to my barn. And I'm going to try and do, like you were saying, where I would shut off the front part of the box so that no other hens could get in there and lay more eggs, because I'm wasting so many eggs, because as soon as a couple of them hatch, they abandon the nest. And I've had probably 15, 20 eggs at a time under a hen, because the other hens just keep going in the same box and laying more, but then they abandon those, and now you've wasted all those eggs. So I'm in the process of designing some kind of brooding area so I can shut off the boxes inside the coop, and they can come out and eat and water on the other side, and they'll be within like a confinement, so nothing else can get in there.
That is a good point, Celeste. I was going to say that it depends on the breed, but at a max, with our breeds, we only try to give them like 8 to 10 eggs. When we were first starting out, I think we were helping out a broody hen and gave her like 12 to 15. and that was way too many for her to keep track of, and she ended up pushing a bunch of them out of the nest. And do not try to put those back into the nest, because the mama knows that those are bad eggs, and in this case it's not an accident, and in this case the chicken knows more than the human.
I was gonna say, Celeste, when you get this thing built, I want a tour.
And I know that you know, a lot of you are talking about actually trying to get your chickens to be broody, but if you have too many broody chickens, you can break them of that. And the way you break them is by putting them in a wire cage. And there's lots of weird, like, people saying putting them underwater for 30 seconds, which I think is just stupid and cruel. But what we found worked for breaking a broody hen, if we needed to break her, is put her in a wire bottom pen with food and water and no darkness. So she didn't have any little corners where she felt, you know, she could get her broody on. And after 3 or 4 days in a cage like that, it'll break a broody hen. So if you need to break hens, that's you gotta have that in your repertoire as well.
Mm-hmm. Right, because if they're broody, they're not laying, and sometimes you'd really prefer that they lay eggs instead. Or they're not always laying as often. When they're really seriously incubating, they stop. They just, yeah, I find sometimes I agree with what Cindy's saying. I don't have a great wire cage way to do that. I've spent a lot of time being like, no, you're not going to sleep in the nesting box, and I'm going to get you out and carry you around for a while, because that's about what I can do sometimes. And it doesn't always work. Sometimes the next night they're back in the nesting box, and you got to do that for like a week or something. But the less you allow them to have their little cozy spot, and the more annoying it is for them that they're like, oh, she's moving me around again. Oh, they stop with the broodiness after a while. So.
Okay, so I just want to note that we are at 3:01 at this point. Again, I hate to cut it off because I know you all love talking chickens, but I also want to respect the time. Sounds like we'll talk again. There have been lots of questions about whether or not we'll have another one of these or when the next one is. So maybe that's something to talk about. And if any of you panelists feel like going for a round 2, we'll get the word out there. But I'd say thank you to all of you. I learned a lot, and I love chickens, but I haven't had any in a long time. So it's been very informative.
Yeah, I'm down for another round. I think we could definitely do another hour long on just how to predator proof, on just how you free range or don't free range, or how you set up your I think we could do 1 hour easy on each of these.
Yeah.
Yeah, so to all of you who, all of the people who signed up, we have your emails, and if another one of those gets pulled together, we will most certainly reach out to all of you to let you know.
Thank you, Stefan.
Well,
Thanks for hosting.
Thanks for.
Adios.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.